What's up, builders? It's me, Jimbotron, back at you with another video. In today's video, we'll be reviewing 10 common mistakes that people make in Overwatch Stadium that can sabotage their gameplay. Let's get into it. Number 1. Not playing for cash. This can mean a few things, but at its core, it means that you need to differentiate between Stadium and the base game. I'll give you an example. You're in a situation where you are 2-0 down, and your opponents have a 9,000 lead on you. There's only 3 of you alive, and the opponents are about to cap point and win the round, and you guys jump on and pray to turn that into a 2-1 somehow. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a world where that happens, but the chances of it are very small. And realistically, what happens here is you jump onto the point, all 3 of you die, and you just gave your opponents an extra 1,000 to 2,000 cash. This means you just got mercy ruled because you tried to win the round when it was lost. You should always be thinking about cash when you are engaging, because at the end of the day, having more cash than your opponent makes winning significantly easier and losing significantly harder. So don't be scared to overcommit for a dive if it's to claim a 3k bounty. Sure, you'll probably die after securing it, but your death meant a lot less than theirs in cash terms. Don't be scared to steal people's kills so that you can both share the bounty. Number 2. Overbuilding weapon power. Now, I'm sure we're all guilty at some point or another of building a lot of weapon power or ability power, simply because of the idea that more damage can never be bad, right? Actually, you'd be wrong. So there's some funky calculations with weapon power and ability power scaling that, in order to balance the game so that everyone wasn't using their ultimates 3 times per fight in the late game, they made it so that weapon power and ability power don't give any more ult charge. A 0 weapon power and a 100 weapon power headshot on Cassidy both give 7% ultimate charge. So rather than abusing how much damage you can do, sometimes you need to balance it out with doing that damage more often. By that, I mean attack speed and cooldown reduction. This will make it so you can do weapon power and ability power more often rather than just stronger, so that this actually does benefit ultimate charge. And actually, overall, a balance of attack speed and cooldown reduction combined with weapon power or ability power does actually output a higher DPS than just a single one of the stats anyway. Number 3. Neglecting survivability. So this is probably the most common issue that I see in every single one of my games, is that people often neglect the survival category. All of these items, well, most of these items don't actually give any additional stats outside of making your health bar bigger. And because you don't see these big numbers on your screen as often, by building it over weapon power or ability power, you often find people don't tend to build into survivability. But I'm going to tell you a harsh truth right now, and that's a team of 5 people running only survivability easily beats a team of 5 people running only damage. And quite frankly, it's not even close. Having more survival allows you to stay in fights for longer and get more value out of things. Overall, the regular breakpoints that building damage would break usually just don't apply when you're building into survival. On tank, it's different. However, if you are playing any DPS or support, you should always have at least 2 survival items. It is a good rule of thumb. On tank, you can take 6 for all I care. Your job is to stay alive after all. Number 4. Only having one build. Now, it's very easy to have a strong build on a strong character and run that every single game just to win. However, when you watch good players and you watch bad players play at Stadium, there is one very, very clear distinction. Bad players tend to have a build that they go for, that they stick to, and they'll have X items that they'll buy every round. Whereas when you watch good players, you can watch 5 games consecutively from them, and they probably won't use the same things every single round. Now, obviously, there are exceptions to this, because some items are just undoubtedly better than others in certain circumstances. However, it is a really bad habit to lock yourself into a specific build on a specific path. This kind of crosses over another point on the list, so I won't go too deep into that. Overall, I think I recommend having 2 to 3 builds, and within those builds, having at least 2 different paths that you can take. I know that's a lot to remember. However, that means that you are basically equipped for every scenario that you could come into, and are always able to keep your opponents on their toes as to what you're about to do next. Number 5. Thinking one-tricking is bad. Now, in the base game, there is a very large stigma around one-tricks. This is because playing a single character makes you very, very weak when your opponents can just change to counter that character. No matter how good you get with them, there is always just the ability for your opponents to swap out their character and leave you stranded with no other options to go to. Now in Stadium, this isn't an issue because you can't change characters at all. The main idea of why one-tricking is bad no longer stands. The only issue with one-tricking in Stadium is that there's always a chance that your teammate can take that character if you play DPS or support. However, that's exactly why you have a minute-long draft phase at the start of every game, where you can organize your team to meet your needs. Only playing one character also allows you to understand their kit a lot better and know what works best with them. And in a game where every character can be 5 different things at once, it is extra important to know your matchups, which only comes by playing that character over and over again. Overall, one-tricking isn't a bad thing. Sure, in the base game it's frowned upon. However, in Stadium, it's actually probably more strategic to do it this way. Number 6. Not understanding how a payload race works. Now honestly, this is a topic that isn't as general as the other ones. However, I really think this needs to be discussed. Because the amount of times that my team has been winning a game only to lose a payload race despite being the dominant side is insane. For starters, Payload Race is a game mode where both teams have a payload. You both have to push it to the end. First one to the end wins. Now, one thing that heavily gets overlooked is that the further back your payload is compared to your opponent, the quicker it will move. A lot of people will see a large gap between the payloads and think that they are safe and it's an easy win, or that there is no point in pushing the point as they are so far behind. I am here to tell you that if your opponent is all the way at the end and you have barely pushed your point, that point will go to the end in literally 15 seconds. I know how tempting it is to go and fly on their point to stall it out. However, it is strategically better for your entire team to stay on your point the entire game. Since being behind doesn't really matter until you're both in the final bit, staying on your point allows you to get the payload there quicker and increase your chances of going in ahead at the end. You should only ever worry about stalling your opponent's point past at least the halfway point. Otherwise, as I said, it only takes 10 to 15 seconds to catch up. So, if you were to die stalling your opponent's point, you died for basically nothing. Number 7. Counter-building over counter-picking. Now, a lot of people in the draft phase will differ from the character that they want to play. Simply because of something that your opponent had picked, I'm going to give an example I know all too well here, and that's when a Genji player doesn't play Genji because they see a Mei on the enemy team. Now, I know that for a fact, by default, this is a losing matchup, and it means that my rounds 1 and 2 are probably going to be weaker than if they didn't have a Mei. However, here's where people make the mistake. If you swap onto another character that you are not as comfortable on, those first 2 rounds will probably be better for you than if you were to play your main. However, after that, you'll probably find that you aren't able to carry as hard or play as well as if you'd have picked your main anyway. Simply because in Stadium, characters have items and powers that are good in specific matchups, and this goes for their weaker ones as well. So that Mei, that was an issue. I take anti-beam coating with Forged Under Fire, and suddenly she is no longer an issue. I can continue to play the character that I wanted to play and perform really well. Whereas in the other universe, I decided to pick Soldier because he's my next most comfortable character. I got absolutely destroyed because I can't play a Soldier as well, and I just couldn't input enough into the game. Stop worrying so much about picking the perfect hero and start worrying more about how to build into your bad matchups. Number 8. Neglecting gadgets. Gadgets have been in the game now for half a year, so it's absolutely insane that I still see people not wanting to use these things. Gadgets actually provide similar, if not better stats than what regular items would provide you. However, in return for picking a gadget over an item, you also get an active ability that you can use multiple times per round. and some of these are quick, so you can treat them like abilities, and some of them are super slow, so you need to treat them like a mini ultimate. Regardless of which one you go for, you should always have a gadget. There is a reason that you are only allowed one of these in an entire build, and that's because they are significantly stronger than the base gear items. I'll take one that I love to use, for example, Field Support. Field Support gives 25 armor and 5% weapon power, which, when compared to some of the other blue items, is slightly below average but still not bad. In return, you get this broken healing field that will make you win any 1v1 against your opponent immediately if they were to be on the same build as you but didn't take the gadget. Gadgets are so neglected, and they give you an unfair advantage in certain situations. If you can determine which gadget is good in what situation, you will win significantly more games. Number 9. Not synergizing powers. Now this should be trivial, however, unfortunately, it's not. At the end of the day, powers are created by a development team, and that development team is not stupid. They make powers specifically to work with other powers, and I commonly refer to these as power triads. These are powers that buff another power by taking it. I'll give an example. We'll go with one of my favorite triads, the frontliners. If you take Double Helix, Hunkered Down, and Frontliner. Hunkered Down makes it so that you can activate Frontliners more often. Double Helix makes it so that you can activate Hunkered Down more often, and put together these 3 items, all buffing each other. So rather than picking the powers that you personally like to use, maybe start to consider what powers would make the powers that you like to use better. I am a sucker for this because I really do enjoy just putting on some random powers I like to use. But if you're here watching this video, you probably want to know how to win more games, and this is some of the most sincere advice I could give you. If you want more advice on what power triads are good and what ones aren't, or even just need guidance figuring out what is and isn't a triad, go check out my channel. Every build I post on there features a major triad, whether I tell you they are or not. And number 10, the final most important point, is not having fun. Now this isn't meant to sound cringy or anything like that, but you'd be surprised how many people get wrapped up around winning. They get so focused on getting to this end goal that people tend to often forget why they queued up in the first place. And put it simply, you queue this game because you want to have fun. Whether that's because you get a rush from winning, whether it's because you enjoy how the game works, or whether it's because this is a fun activity you like to do with your friends. You play this game because you get enjoyment from it, even when sometimes it might feel like you don't. And if it wasn't for this, you would never play this game in the first place. So, as cool and everything as it is to try and implement all of these tips and advice into your gameplay, to optimize all of your stuff out, to figure out the meta, to do this, to do that, sometimes you need to really stop and think about why you're queuing the game. And honestly, when you accept that you're here for fun, all of a sudden this thing becomes so much easier. Bit of a longer segment, so my apologies. But my peak in Stadium was back in Season 4. Honestly, it was some of the most fun I had. I was winning and it was great. However, when it got to the end of the season and all of a sudden I'd hit Legend for the first time, I started to think about how much I cared about my rank more than how I cared about actually playing the game. I'd queue even when I wasn't having fun because I wanted to keep my rank. And eventually, when I hit my rank I was happy with, I stopped queuing games because I didn't want to lose this rank. Now, in any other case in your life, if someone came up to you and said, "I'm not doing this activity I really enjoy because I'm happy with where it is at the moment," you'd think they were stupid. You would look at them mad because if you enjoy it so much, why are you treating it like it's a burden to do it? So to end it off there and not to kill you, remember why you're playing this game, guys. It really helps you go a long way. And that's everything for today, builders. Hope you enjoyed. Please make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow.